If you are not open-minded, if you are not able to understand that there are millions of cultures that are different than yours, what is your future going to look like? What are the connections you're going to be able to make? It's probably not going to be many.
It's going to be in you. You have to be willing and have the courage to make that change. And starting with caring about culture, that's a great place to start.
Welcome to Evolve Ventures, the one place where leaders like you can dependably go to shift your consciousness to unlimited potential. I am your host, Bianca Thomas.
And I am your host, Emilia Smith. Welcome back to another episode 109, Why Should I Care About Culture? So for those of you who are clicking into this episode, you are going to learn some of the whys from Bianca and I's perspective and help to avoid some of those pain points that you might be up against as it comes to maybe some culture clashes that you might be having in your day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month. But if you have not already, jump back to our other episode that we released last week, episode 108. But before we dig into this episode, I know B's going to jump in with a little bit of a story. So B, over to you.
So imagine you start dating someone. And this is a person whose ethnicity you've never dated before, right? You're like, ooh, damn, they're ethnic. Like, they're so good looking, or they're this, or they're unique, or whatever. So you're dating this person. It's going really well. And let's just assume this is a heterosexual relationship. And so you're going to meet this person's family. And let's assume that this person you're dating is like, okay, listen, when you go in, there's certain things you need to know about my family. Mm-hmm. When you walk in, you have to make sure you greet everyone. When you walk in, you have to make sure that, you know, if they offer you food, no matter how weird it looks, you have to eat it. Otherwise, like, you're going to disrespect them. And they're like, you're like, wait, what the hell? What are you talking about? Like, you're making it seem like I'm going to war here. Mm-hmm. And this person is preparing you, and they're prepping you, and they're coaching you on what to say, what not to say, how to act, how not to act. So you're like, okay. So you go in, and now there could be two scenarios. Number one, you do nothing of what the partner says. You don't say hi to everyone, and you don't kiss them on the cheek twice, which is what a lot of ethnic cultures do, right? Middle Eastern, let's just say it's mine. Mm-hmm. So you don't kiss everyone on the cheek. You don't go say hi to everybody. You don't eat the food when they offer it to you.
Oh.
So they're offering you food, and you look at your partner and you're like, what the hell is that? And they're like, it's stuffed cow intestine. And you're like, it's what? And then you look at this other thing, and it's like, is that raw meat? And it's like, yeah, that's raw meat. It's called gibbenaye. And you're like, what? What do you mean? You're eating raw meat? Like, you guys are going to die. And so you see all of these weird foods that you don't eat, and everyone is staring at you like, who is this person in my house being so disrespectful? So then it's time to clean up, and all of the men are going and they're doing their thing, and all of the women are cleaning up. And let's say you're a woman and you decide, hell no, I'm not falling into this misogynist thing. I'm not going to help you guys clean up. So your partner's mom is looking at you like, who the hell is this girl you brought into my house? And then everyone decides that they're going to eat fruit, and they start drinking the coffee, right? Let's say it's dessert time, and you're going to start drinking the coffee. And the coffee doesn't look like normal coffee. It's Turkish coffee, which means it's a lot darker, and it comes in a tiny little cup. And you're like, that looks like mud. I'm not drinking that. You're done. Your partner's going to leave you. Everyone in that family is going to shun you. And I know I'm being silly about this, but
there's truth to it.
There's a lot of truth to it. Now let's say scenario number 2. You're a little nervous, but you're like, okay, I like this person a lot. I want to make a good impression. So I'm going to walk in. I'm going to do what my partner said. I'm going to say hello to everybody first, especially the mom, because the mom is always the host. I'm going to say hello. When they offer me the specific food, even though it looks funky, I'm going to eat it. You're like, ooh, that's actually really good. Like, it looks kind of funky. It looks like a legit intestine, but I'm going to eat it anyways. And you're like, ooh, that's actually really, really good. Mm-hmm. I'm going to eat the raw meat, and I'm going to take some pita bread and I'm going to eat it. And there's olive oil and mint and all this other really good stuff on it. And you're like, wow, this is actually the best thing I've ever tasted. Everyone's cleaning up. You're like, I don't really want to help, but I want to make a good impression on the mom, so I'll help. You take the coffee when everyone offers it. You drink it, and then the mom reads your fortune when you're done with the cup, because they do the reading of the cup afterwards. A lot of them do. And you make a beautiful impression, and you get invited to come back. Think of the difference in those two scenarios. Now, again, I know I'm being silly about it, and I know that this is going to be a little bit deeper than all of that, but think of the implications of both of those actions. In the first scenario, you are completely disregarding the person's culture. I'm not going to do what they're doing. I'm going to stay in what I believe is right. I'm not going to do that. You guys are weird. That food looks gross. And they feel completely disrespected. But in the second one, you let your guard down. You put the wall down. You're willing to learn. You're willing to be a little open-minded. You try something new. You end up getting a really great experience. You build a deeper connection with your partner. Now their family likes you a little bit more. And it's a really great experience. There are so many opportunities in this world for a scenario like that. We live in a world with tons of different cultures, whether it's an ethnic culture, whether it's fitness culture, whether it's LGBTQ plus culture, whether it's sports culture, female culture, male culture, whatever. If you are not open-minded, if you are not able to understand that there are millions of cultures that are different than yours, and they could have a positive impact on my life, or just understanding that if I am pushing people away because I believe that my culture is right, what is your future going to look like? What are the connections you're going to be able to make? It's probably not going to be many.
Powerful. Thanks, B. I think that a lot of us have had many experiences where that's the case. And I love how you brought it to the dating scene, because that's just like so relatable with so many different people, especially now more than ever, when you have interracial couples, you have intercultural couples, you have all different modifications of what relationships and relationship building looks like. Especially now that we're globally connected more than we ever have been, right? It's almost like a lot of people have been forced, and I do have a lot of gratitude for COVID as a result of that. Post-COVID and during COVID, a lot of us were actually forced into the exposure of different cultures, because especially for teams and businesses and whatnot, you might have a colleague that now is in a completely different region, a completely different country than you might be in. And you've had to figure out how to work with them and how to develop that trust, that connection, that emotional agility, if you will, and not just tolerance, but like humility. Because if you're working on a project together, in this case, like for example, what you had said, the goal was to ultimately have acceptance, social, cultural acceptance for your partner that you brought to the table with your family, right? You want familial acceptance and love so that that person, you have a higher probability of success of achieving the goal that you desire, which is to have a partner that you can love and have your family love them as well. And we see that so often. Just like with relationships and teams and in organizations, you also have people where you have a goal, a project to get results. You have a goal, a project to get things done. And you have different perspectives that are brought to the table. And you guys might not necessarily be dating, but you might have a leader or team members or a boss that might really need these things to get executed on. And then all of a sudden you have a coworker whose approach is very different because their cultural background is far more connection driven than results. It's far more let's have small talk than it actually is let's get things done when you first jump onto that Zoom meeting. So my mind went to a third scenario, which naturally my mind goes to adding one more layer to this, which the question of why should I care about culture? We are in a hyper-connected global economy, and that's not going to stop. Fun fact, like we are going to be even more connected in 10, 15, 20 years than we can genuinely even fathom right now. You know, like whether it's finding your partner online, you know, whether it's finding your team members and attracting them to your community, or whether that even be connecting with your grandma and grandpa who decided to, you know, move across country and settle their lives in like a tropical place. You're connecting through FaceTime. And so that third scenario would be the why should I care about culture? I'll mention that in a second, but in those two scenarios, you have having the student's mindset, the humility in that scenario number 2, all right? Because I care about you, I'm willing to have an open mind. The first was, I care about you, but I'm not doing that. Why? Because it conflicts with my beliefs and I'm so stuck in mine, right? You have the fixed and the growth mindset at play. The third, well, before I get into that, what can be lost, like you had said, is a lot of pain. If you go with scenario number 1, what's the probability that you guys are going to break up? That you guys are like going to have fights and you guys are going to have, you know, you're going to feel like the middle person between your family and between your partner. And I'm sure we've all experienced this at one point or another. And who wants to be in that middle position where it's like, well, I love you, but I also love my family. And so you get to that point where it almost feels like there's an ultimatum because either your family says, not happening, we're going to ostracize you because you're choosing that person who doesn't respect our culture, who doesn't do this, who goes against the grain without even asking why, right? No humility towards your partner's culture. Or scenario number 2, your partner says, because I love you, I am willing to have the humility and to understand what your culture is all about. You know, I might have just tasted the best food ever, even though it looked a little weird. And now I might get so excited to like figure out, how do I learn how to cook that? Or how do I learn how to navigate those relationship dynamics in the future when maybe we're a little bit more further along in our relationship journey? However, what I find is in that scenario number 2 and number 1, number 1 is almost like butting heads, right? No one wins. It's a lose-lose because your partner doesn't get to understand culture and your family doesn't get to understand their culture because it's just not going to happen. Number 2, your partner understands your culture, your family's culture, but your family's culture has no understanding of what that took and how that pulled them out of alignment to experience yours, right? It's a give and a take. What was given from that family, right, to your partner? And we see this so often. I see this in relationship coaching too, where one partner in scenario number 2 goes and says, okay, I'm willing to go outside of alignment. I'm willing to buy into the misogynistic tendencies that this culture was founded upon. However, we need to have a conversation, which brings me to the scenario number 3. Why should I care about culture? So these are so helpful to understand, but the scenario 3 is something that I personally believe that a lot of people struggle to have. They have the awareness of what one culture is, right? And this is because that has been either through their experience or through like the media, or people have shared what this culture is all about. But some of the biggest pain that I have found with people is where their awareness and their ability to influence the evolution of that culture through their personal choices, their ability is very low. Their belief in their ability is really low. And so that scenario number 3, actually in Out of the Mud, this kind of came out last night when we were in Out of the Mud about, the disconnect. It's happening on either side of the first 2 scenarios, right? Your family doesn't know anything about your partner if they're willing to kind of forego what their cultural beliefs are and take that humility. However, either way, that's a win-loss. Win for the family, loss for the partner. How can we find a win-win-win scenario about how we go about experiencing culture? And this is what came up in Out of the Mud last night, of that when people think about culture, they typically think about the historical vantage point of what culture means. So what does this mean? Like, passed down from generation to generation. This is the tradition. This is how we greet people. This is how we accept people. These are the foods that we make. These are the ways we go about doing things. These are beliefs that we have and hold dear. And if we don't, we are ostracized. We are not a part of the culture. It's very binary thinking. And how we ended the Out of the Mud last night in our event was with a quote to not forget that you, here and now, today, can influence culture as it is. And a lot of people don't believe in their ability to do that. So why should you care about culture? From my perspective, is because that scenario number 3 only exists if you have the ability and the belief in yourself to make it exist. Otherwise, culture will not evolve. The trajectory won't change. And you might be that partner that goes in and gets out of alignment for an entire lifetime and then pass that belief system down, without people even questioning or understanding. And I say this because obviously I've been personally, I've witnessed people have scenario number 1 or scenario number 2 and not even thought that there's a scenario number 3. I even have personal friends and family who have chosen scenario number 2, completely relinquishing who they are as a person and completely relinquishing their own empowerment to try to figure that out in a collaborative place. And so whether it be the workplace or your relationships, why you should care about culture from my perspective is because you, the listener, has the ability to evolve the parts of culture that aren't serving the world, that are disconnecting people, that are causing so much pain and suffering without any sort of accountability. So I didn't mean to take it down the dark rabbit hole, but that's the reality. There's a lot of aspects of those scenarios where I love that it started playful and I'm bringing it down. So B, you got to bring this right back up. But where we got to care about these things. If we don't take care to it and try to create that third scenario where maybe you as that partner goes in and says, hey babe, I really want to connect with your culture. I'm willing to be open-minded, but these are my boundaries. I don't want to do that. And how can maybe you as the middle woman have the courage, or middleman have the courage to maybe connect with your family, right? That might look like a really challenging conversation, right? No change ever happens if choice doesn't change. Meaning if you don't have the courage to step forward and say this, all right, I'm open to hearing your perspective. That is so essential for my growth. However, when it strikes a chord that isn't good for the future, isn't good for the whole, that's when maybe let's have a courageous conversation. Let's have a dialogue on how scenario number 3 from your perspective, from my family's perspective, from your family's perspective, and let's try to carve a path forward that actually makes sense. Because at the end of the day, like you said in Out of the Mud B, we all want to be loved, cared, heard, seen, valued, connected. That's at the end of the day what's underneath all this. And when you don't care, you're apathetic to how that approach can happen. And you don't believe in your ability to actually change the trajectory of what that could look like.
I don't have anything to add. I think you said that perfectly.
My question to you is, B, I know that you have personally, like you and I have both experienced this, like changing culture. First, you have to care. How have you cared in your personal experience? And I want to ask you this in particular because of some of the things that you've grown through that I know a lot of people can relate to, that I am on the other end of helping others, such as yourself, in relationship coaching and whatnot, work through. If you don't care about culture, what is some of the biggest downsides of our listeners, honestly, if they don't focus and actual put intentional care into cultures that aren't theirs, that don't open up their ears? What is the biggest pain point that people could get as a result of not caring about culture and not caring about other people's culture, right? Just caring about mine.
You're going to be completely stuck in one way of life.
Why should anyone care about that though? Like, what is the biggest pain underneath that? Like, I absolutely agree with you, but like, go further, go deeper.
Okay, I'll give an example. I've talked about this a lot, and I'm not like chastising my family at all. Like, I've done a lot of work with my family, and we're really starting to get on much better terms because of what I'm going to talk about. I grew up in a culture that was very homophobic. And I grew up in that culture understanding and being very explicitly told, this is our culture and you're going to accept it or you can leave. We're this way. We are not going to change. We are not going to accept you if you do not follow our rules, beliefs, values, expectations, and whatever. And it wasn't my parents saying this explicitly, but it was like the entire culture in general. I heard messages everywhere. Me, my siblings, all my cousins, we were all basically told the same thing. We will not accept you if you do not follow our way of being, our way of living, our way of doing things. And it kept my entire family stuck from being able to have good relationships, meaningful relationships with anyone that was outside of their culture. So it kept them stuck in very narrow mindsets, confined to their one way of being, which didn't allow them to experience other cultures, to experience other people, to learn new things, to get a much broader and wider experience of life. And so when I came out, it was a huge deal. And now, granted, I could have done this better. I could have stayed and I could have said, I'm going to force you guys to change. Or I'm going to kind of make you guys learn to accept this by helping you understand it, by helping you see the way that I am, helping you to learn and to grow. But I didn't. I was in a bad time in my life. I was scared. A lot of stuff was going on. So I decided to leave. And because I left, at the time, I think it was the right thing for me. But like, my family then didn't have to grow. Because it's like, all right, there you go. You don't have to change now. Like the quote unquote problem is now gone. And I know so many people who are like this, where they might not be gay, but maybe they're in a family that really values cooking with meat, for example. And you're like, I'm a vegetarian. And instead of helping your family understand why that's important to you, you just don't go around them. Or you don't let them, or you just shut down and leave whenever they try to talk about it. So now I am helping them to understand. I am helping them to see so that they can understand, so that our relationship can grow and get better, which thankfully it finally is. But that wouldn't have happened if I didn't first understand their culture. And granted, it's my culture too, our Middle Eastern culture. But really understand, why do they think the way that they do? Because that's all culture is. It's a set of rules, values, beliefs, assumptions, rituals. And if you can understand that, you can help make change. You can help understand, okay, why do you see it the way that you do? and ask questions and provide insight. And it'll cause your connection to actually get better and cause you to actually cause your family and your friends and your partner and whoever to really be able to see you, so that we do all feel loved and seen and heard and valued and understood, rather than what's going on for a lot of people, which is my culture thinks this and we're not going to change, and your culture thinks that and you're not going to change. So we're just going to fight each other and no one's going to win. And we all want the same thing. We all want to be seen, heard, loved, understood, for our kids to be safe, for our values to be heard and whatnot. But you can't do that when you're just fighting each other. So why should you care? Because not everyone is going to think like you. Not everyone believes the same thing that you do. Not everyone sees the world the way that you do. Not everyone has the same culture that you do. And you're locking yourself in a box if you don't allow yourself to see, why is this person thinking that way? And really asking it, not in a condescending way, but really trying to understand. Because when you can understand, then you can communicate. Then you can drive to a middle ground. Or then you can just say, you know what? I see you. I don't fully agree, but I do see you. How can we move forward anyways? What can we do? How can we keep our relationship? Or how do we part ways and have there be no animosity? I see you, you see me. I don't hate you. I'm not mad at you. We're just different, and that's okay. But that can't happen without the communication. And that's why it's so important, because otherwise it's an eye for an eye. And then everyone is blind and everyone feels alone. And we have enough of that in the world.
So true. Well articulated. Thank you for that. I think that if we don't care about culture, we abandon, I wrote down here because it just like came out of me, we abandon the pursuit to learn who we are. I think life can very much be a journey of learning who you are. And when you abandon that pursuit, you don't have the choice to determine on your own accord, in your own standing, who the heck you are, what is right for you, what doesn't feel good, where are your boundaries, right? What do you believe in? And when you don't care about culture, you abandon that pursuit. And I think that genuinely, like, the biggest, most memorable parts of my life has been learning about other cultures. Like, I could give a whole story about my journey of and to China and living amongst Chinese culture as a young woman. Like, you know, I could go into so many different stories around that, but I think that life is quite the journey. The destination for sure matters. And if we are all blind, you can bank on the fact that we will all be apathetic. We will all be very lonely. We will all be very upset and sad and mad and angry, and the world that we know it will crumble around us. So I believe in our ability to change that trajectory. And I know, B, you definitely do. And I know, you know, the individuals that are part of this society definitely have a feeling, a calling, a passion to change that trajectory, to have the courage to evolve culture. And it starts with these things. They might seem so big and daunting, but when you break it down, it can be so small. And it starts with you. There's not going to be an outside factor that changes your world, that changes your belief. It's going to be in you. You have to be willing and have the courage to make that change. And starting with caring about culture, that's a great place to start.
Key takeaway, and then episode suggestion.
I think the key takeaway is what I just said. You know, when you don't care about culture, you abandon the pursuit to learn and understand who you are. And that's a journey that I don't want anyone to regret not having when they see their time. My episode suggestion would be 71, how to lead your family through the growth journey. What about you, B?
Key takeaway is not understanding each other's culture is what has caused so much of the chaos in our past. And this is going to be harsh, but I'm going to give a very blunt example. Auschwitz. That right there. What happened in that scenario? And granted, I don't think there's anything going on like that now, but that's what happens when you are so rigid in your own culture and your own beliefs. Episode suggestion, number 45, 5 things we wish we heard growing up.
This is the goodie, and I'm really grateful to close out our culture theme this month with something very powerful. So hopefully you, as our beautiful listeners, were able to connect to some of the stories that Bianca and I brought forth in this month. We are really grateful for those of you who came to Out of the Mud. That was such a great success. And we're really looking forward to next month. B, if you would share with our listeners how they can join us in this journey and evolve their journey. What do they have to look forward to in the next month of topics, of IG Lives, of Out of the Mud events, all that jazz?
The theme for the next month is going to be all about worth and self-worth. And I know this is a touchy topic for a lot of people and something too many of us struggle with. So if you want to learn more about it, if you want to be heard, if you want to have your story told through us and with us, join us in this journey for the next month. We haven't decided on we are going to be having Out of the Mud be on a new day. So we are no longer doing it on Fridays. We've invited so many people and so many people have wanted to come, but Friday nights are just such a hard day for so many people. So we want as many people to be able to come to this as possible. So we are going to be changing the day. We haven't, like I said, we're not 100% certain on what day that is going to be, but be on the lookout. We are going to be posting it on our social media when we do decide. And if you want to talk about your own story and your own journey and your own culture and whatnot, then we are doing the Your Evolve story in the Evolve Venture Society private group on Facebook. There's so many people in that group like you who want to grow and who want to be seen and heard and understood and have a real and deep connection with other people. So it is a beautiful place to be and join, and there's always a ton of engagement in there.
Reach out to myself or Bianca if you are struggling with culture related items, not items, but like real life stuff. Our door is always open to our listeners in particular. And we would love to hear from you. If you loved this stuff, just wait, giddy up. We are off to the races for some more evolved topics, and we would love your feedback. So we're grateful that you joined us in this journey, in this episode, and in this month, and we're looking forward to seeing you next month.
Bye.